negros y indios nativos somos los verdaderos israelitas.
¿Esto dónde lo dice según el versículo?
Esto dice en la Biblia, está escrita en la Reina Valera.
We got to live in this district. The whiteys don't come down here, man, and live in the fucked up houses, man. The whiteys don't come down here, man, and have all the fucked up fucking no heat in the fucking winter time. You understand? We do, Jack. So therefore, like, wow, we got to make it a better place. You understand that?
Like they want to make it a racial problem, you know. So we didn't want that, you know. So I jumped in, I put in for my boy, because he's a black brother. You know? So we made an unracial problem.
We the Puerto Ricans should rise up and defend ourselves against these dogs. The North American is trying to steal our identity as Puerto Ricans and call us Americans. We Puerto Ricans are Puerto Ricans till the day we are born, until the day we die.
Chicanos killing Chicanos is what they want. Blacks and Chicanos killing each other is what they want. That's how they run this place. Once we get together, they don't run shit.
On my raza out there, shalom. Yahweh Shemiyah Shabbarakatah. This is the ISUPK coming out of 125th Street, Harlem, New York City. This is Zakiad of the ISUPK, Office 5000 out of California. As always, the inconvenient truth coming to you every Wednesday. At this certain time, you know what I'm saying? Hang on one second. I want to thank everybody for joining me. You know, I got a topic today, Latino, Hispanic, or Israelite. What are we, man? Where do we come from? What is that? What is that all about? You know, where do we get this from? We see a lot of things happening to our raza today. You know what I mean? We see what happened. Pretty sure if you tuned in on Monday to our show, La Pura Neta, the pure truth, right? La Pura Neta, you've seen that we were talking about the trailer that was filled with Hispanic brothers and sisters and children that they found, what was that, 48 dead inside of that trailer. That's, you know, that's harsh. That's, I had said on Monday that's a massacre. You know what I'm saying? That's a massacre. That's what we saw there. We saw an atrocity of what happened to our people, man. You know, that's a sad thing. And, you know, that was posted on Monday, made headlines for a couple of hours, and then all of a sudden, it disappeared. Now you're not really hearing about it. You know what I mean? So the total that they said was 53 dead. That's what the total was, 53 in all. You're talking about 53 Hispanic brothers and sisters who were found dead in a truck that was smuggling them, you know, into America. And you know, you got to think about it, man. These brothers and sisters are being smuggled into America. They're being smuggled into America. If you look at these people that are coming from the Ukraine, they're at the border of Tijuana and they're being walked into America. They're being brought here. They're given residence. They're given a place to stay. They're given a home. They're given what they need to survive in America. Our brothers and sisters come here. They're abandoned in the heat, in pure middle of what was that, Texas. You know what I mean? The middle of Texas. You know what I mean? San Antonio. Left there to die. You know what I mean? And the sad part is that, you know, they're abandoned there. And if you ask about it, man, you know, you got to understand that not only America that does that to our people, but we're doing that to our people too. You know what I'm saying? Like we're the ones who are also like, to ignore that is to be part of that. To think it's gonna go away, it's not. You know, I have another thread that I'm on, and saw Hispanic brothers on that thread, and I'll tell you something. I didn't see anybody post anything about this at all. Like on that whole thread is, you know, maybe 2,000, 3,000 people, and I didn't see anybody post anything about the 53 that died. You know, the youngest one about 18 years old that were in that. That's a human tragedy that we're seeing happen there, and all because we want to come to this nation, to this country, to America, and we're trying to make it here to better themselves, to better their lives, because they understand, you know, that in Mexico it's such a difficult thing. In Latin America, it's such a difficult thing. In Central America, it's such a difficult thing. You know what I'm saying? Yakalyala, Shalom, Manali Gutierrez, Shalom, Malakma, Shalom, Barakayala, Shalom, Yahweh to all the brothers joining in and tuning in. Don't forget, man, comment, ask questions, get in the show, man. Malakma, if you want to join in, let me know. Yakalyala, if you want to join in, let me know. You know, what's happening here is a tragedy, and it's something that has been going on. Like, when do Mexicans, when do Latino Americans, and I don't even know what to call it, right? I don't want to use the word Latino because I know how wrong I am to use the word Latino. I don't want to use the word Hispanic because I know how wrong I am to use the word Hispanic. You know what? I can't use the word Mexican because it's not really directed to only Mexican people. We got people from El Salvador, from Guatemala, from Honduras. You know, our Haitian brothers just went through something themselves. You know what I mean? Coming to the border of Texas also and being whipped by these bastards, you know, because they find it amusing, or it's their heritage or their tradition to do things like that. You know what I mean? And so, you know, Manalik, you're right. La Jaula Dorada, La Jaula de Oro. Tigres del Norte had a song, no? La Jaula de Oro. And it's a golden prison for us. That's what they called it, a golden prison. Why? Because this prison for us has golden bars. You know, we're surrounded by the promise of a better place, the promise of a better tomorrow for us. And you know, we come here and some of us embrace it, and you know, we live the dream, and for us it's fantastic. But when we look at our brothers and sisters who are trying to make it over here, they've been making it even more and more difficult for them to get over here. It's become a death trap for them. So what do we call it, man? Do we call it Latinos? Do we call them Hispanic? You know, what do we call them? You know what I'm saying? What do we call ourselves? Where are we at? What's our real what's our real heritage? What's our real tradition? So we can go into, you know, saying that that we might be, you know, I know a lot of Latino brothers, you know, Hispanic brothers, raza, they choose to call themselves Mexicas. We understand this word. If you're Mexicano, if you're raza, you understand what Mexica is. We understand where that comes from. There's a big movement going on for the Mexicas, you know. There's a big rise up of everybody wanting to be, you know, what do they say, Mexica, somos Mexica, you know. And I know I've encountered a few, and, you know, they want to claim the Mexica. There's nothing wrong with that. You want to claim Mexica, you can go ahead and claim your Mexica heritage. If you're Mexica, then you have every right to you know, uphold your Mexica heritage. But unfortunately, a lot of us are not Mexica. A lot of us do not come from that bloodline of the Mexica. You know what I'm saying? To say, oh, you're Aztec. Well, you know, a lot of us were not Aztec. A lot of us come from different tribes, depending where you come from in Mexico. You know what I mean? And so, what's different? It's difficult. It's different to say that we can't fit into certain things because they're not of ours. You know what I mean? And now we stand here, and now we've been throughout growing up. If you're raza, you know, we hear about, oh, we're Chicanos, you know, we're you know, Mexicas, like I said, or we're pochos. I know we've heard the word pochos. We're pochos. Different words that come to us where we wanna claim something, but where are we at? Where are we at with that? What is the reality of where we're at with that? Because if we go further back, who were we? Where did we come from? And I want to bring a map real quick. Let me get this real quick, and here we go. So let me, if you're tuning in with me, eres de raza, eres Latino, eres Mexicano, ¿verdad? Well, no, maybe you might have heard this before. I'm going to bring this forward a little bit. We talk about where we come from, our origin, right? Where we started from. Tell you a lot of the conquistadores and the writers, Bartolomé de las Casas, and many other writers, right? They knew that we were not just any, some Indians, some lost, nomads, or what do you call? How would you say, savages? They know we weren't savages. They knew that we were a special people. They knew that we weren't just some tribe that came out of nowhere. And so did our ancestors. So did our ancestors know that we came from somewhere, before we got here. They understood that we came from somewhere. The topic is, what are we, Latinos, Hispanic, or are we Israelites? Because that's what it is today. Now, when we start to look at our history, if you study your history, your Mexican history, your Hispanic or Latino, whatever you want to call it, if you study your history, I'm going to say our indigenous history. If you study our indigenous history, you begin to realize that we come from beyond the time of just the pyramids in Mexico, or any of the archaeology that they find today. We come from beyond that. We come from further back. And before I finish here real quick, I'll continue in a minute, but I'm going to start with this story here, because we want to know where we come from, right? So let me see if you understand what this is. If you are on my ISUPK
Okay, here we go. Now I'm back on. Can you guys hear me? I'm back on. Can you hear my mic? Giving a mic check right now, real quick, for the brothers on my live stream. The water. Can you hear me now? For the brothers on my live stream, hopefully you can hear me. I'm back on. No sweat. We continue forward. So, the story of the 7 caves, the image that you just saw me post, is a story of the origin of the Latin American people. This story goes back to predates the conquest of Mexico. The reason I'm going into this is to prepare you for our lecture that we're going to have in Chicago, and I thought I'd bring this out this time. So this painting here, and let me go back to it one more time. Hopefully the brothers jump back onto my the painting that you see here predates the conquest of Mexico. It's a codex, and it's a story of the 7 caves. What it represents is the initial place where the tribes in Mexico had come together, or a people came together. Different tribes ended up here in this one place. No one knows where it's at. It's known as Aslan. If you're Mexican, you understand the word Aslan. It's known as Aslan, which is the origin of the peoples of Latin America. It is said that these people arrived from somewhere, and when they disembarked from their journey, they all ended up in this one location. From this one location, they spent, who knows how long they spent there, but they gathered there and they spent a number of perhaps years together, months. It doesn't really tell that story how deep it goes, but they spent time there together, and then slowly started all going their own separate ways. Now, how do you know how long it was? Well, because the so-called Mexica people, the Aztecs that you know, the last of the Aztecs during the conquest of Mexico, Cuauhtémoc and Moctezuma, they were from that tribe. That was the last tribe to come out of that cave. They were the last of the nomadic tribes that stayed in that cave and then ended up, dispersing, the last tribe that dispersed. But before them, there was the Olmecs, there was the Toltecs, there was the Mayans, there was the the Chichimecas. There was plenty of tribes. Before them, they had already left. They had already made their way out into this place that we know as Azareth, right? They had a different name for it. They had a different name for it, right? But they dispersed from there and went on. And from that point, they began to populate, this continent. So our people come from a time before this place, and there's a lot of stories in Latin America that tell the story of where we come from. There's a Mayan story that has been written in the Popol Vuh that says that we come from the land of the east where the sun rises. There's a story in the Popol Vuh that talks about a man that separated the sea and bring his people out. There's a story in the Popol Vuh that talks about a man like Moses who freed his people from captivity. Not only is there that story there, but there's also stories in like Peru. Peru has a story of the Ayar brothers. The Ayar brothers were a family that escaped from a flood, and they ended up coming to this high mountain in Peru, and there they established a city, right? The Inca cities, and well, let me go further, right, and read it, right. Give me 1 second. It's an incident. It's an interesting story, right? It's an interesting story about brothers that ended up coming out of what they known as the flood, right? Let me see. Give me 1 second. And it's funny because, you know, when you start to look at the stories, you know, they all seem to take place during the time of, you know, of our ancestors. It's known as the Israelites. So let me read this story, right? So let me read this story for you of the Ayar brothers. The Ayar brothers, a magical legend that gives life to the history of Cusco. Cusco is in Peru, right? In the mountains, the Inca Empire. Many myths and legends have been known around the Inca Empire. Stories, it says, full of magic and mysticism. One of the oldest and most famous stories is one that tells us how the city of Cusco was founded, considered as the navel of the world, discovered the history of the Ayar brothers, right? And this is the story. And it starts like this: at the end of the great flood, which devastated the land of the mountain Tampu Tokok, the legend tells that 4 young brothers appeared with their wives, Ayar Manco and Mama Okla, Ayar Kachi, Mama Kora, Ayar Uchu and Mama Rahua, and Ayar Akua and Mama Hakua, who along with 10 organized families, says 10 organized Inca families, overtook a long journey in search of fertile land where they could settle. So here we're hearing the story of the Ayar brothers. Let me see, were they in captivity or were they in rulership at that time? Well, it's funny. Imagine this, Rana. This story, it says, takes place at the end of the Great Flood. So we're talking about the flood. At least this story is talking about the flood. So when you read this story, it sounds like it's talking about what is that? Noah's flood, because that's the only flood that that we understand, right? That's the only flood we know about. It's a story that's told around the world in many different cultures, but we know where it comes from. The story comes from the Bible. It's a biblical story. It's a story about of God and putting an end to, you know, a certain era or a certain civilization or a certain time because of all that was happening. So when you look at this story of the Ayar brothers, once again, we're just kind of going into the history of Latin America, because the question is, what are we, Latinos, Hispanos, or are we Israelites? So if we look at this story of the Ayar brothers, well, then the Ayar brothers were Israelites because they have the story of the Bible. Now, most people will tell you, well, that story, you know, it's anybody can have, but let's face it, the biblical stories in the Bible stand the test of time. You can't, you know, you can't just push them to the side. You know, when you look at the stories of the Mayans tell the same stories that are in the Bible. When you look at the stories of the Aztecs tell the same stories of the Bible. So do the Indians from North America. They also have similar stories, biblical stories that are in the Bible. So when we begin to see these stories that are biblical, and you begin to really see the stories of what we call Latin American people, you begin to understand that this whole thing is related. Like, we're all coming from one place. Once again, the reason I'm doing this is because we will have a lecture in Chicago called Before Columbus. And this is to get some insight of where we come from. Latinos or Hispanos, we don't, and I'll tell you something, us Mexicans, we don't like to use the word Latino, or we don't like to use the word Hispanic, because we understand that is not our culture. Latino is a name, comes from Latin, from the word Latin, which is a Greek language, right? That's not our language. That's the conquistadors' language. When you say Hispano, well, they call it, the reason why we're called Hispanic is because the original conquistadores, a lot of them came from a place called Hispaniola. Hispaniola was like a place, a city, a state in Spain, in that area called Hispaniola. And when they came to the conquest, they decided to call this landmass Hispaniola. And then they also called it Nueva España, New Spain, Hispaniola, right? These are the names they gave this place. You know, why? Because they were trying to find some name for this continent, and they were finding these names to call it. They called it the Americas, as we know, America Vespucci, but they also wanted to call it these other names. They were looking to change the name to this place. You know what I'm saying? Let me give you some history on Hispaniola, right? So, giving you a little history on Hispaniola and why we're not called Hispanics. You know, people are like, oh, you know, you're called Hispano, right? We in Spanish, Hispaniola is the word they gave us, right? And it's actually, you know, what they used to call certain islands. Haiti, the Haiti was known as Hispaniola. They were known as Hispaniola. Caribbeans were part of the Hispaniola. Cuba was part of Hispaniola. All these were part of this place called Hispaniola. But it wasn't ours. It came from the Europeans. They named it that. And then in return, they wanted to give us that name, you know, and us keep it. And today we're still called Hispanics, as if we're from Hispaniola. That's not our language. That's not our name. That's not where we come from, right? That's the name of the conquistadores. So when you call us Hispanics, you know, of course we're gonna be like, man, come on now, we're not Hispanic, we're not Hispanic, we're not Latinos. You know, this is not our names. This is the name of the colonizer. This is what he called us. He called us Latinos. He called us Hispanics. You know what I mean? They're the ones who came with that idea, giving us these names. What did the brother say? Those are bywords that they gave us, you know. But in return, what they're trying to do is they're trying to lose us by giving us these names that don't belong to us. You know what I mean? You know, let me tell you something. Hispaniola, which was the island of Cuba, the island of Puerto Rico, the Antilles Island, they were called Hispaniola. They gave them that name, Hispaniola. The sugar cane was introduced to Hispaniola. And in the Canary Islands, right, the first sugar mill was in Hispaniola, which is about the 1500s when they bring that first sugar mill and started using this this place as a trap for slaves. What was his name? Diego Colon. Diego Colon, which was the son of Christopher Columbus, was one of the first ones to start to initiate sugar plantations. Right, he started to initiate sugar plantations, bringing our Judite brothers to islands like Puerto Rico, islands like the Dominica Republicana, islands like Haiti and Puerto Rico, to make them work on these sugar plantations. You know what I mean? And people like Diego Colon, Christopher Columbus' son, he was the ones doing these things. In the beginning of the 1500s, the whole Caribbean islands, right? They were raided by the French continually because of all the slaves and all the money that was being made back and forth, millions of dollars for sure, coming out of areas like Cuba and the Havana and Puerto Rico. Then the Dutch came in; they did the same thing. The Dutch, the French, the Spaniard. You know what I mean? The who else? Man, the Muslims also did that. Believe it or not, the Muslims, they also were part of this whole thing. But we already know that Most High in Christ for the ISUPK teaching us the history of our people and how deep it goes. It was the early 17th century that Hispaniola was really established in this place. You know what I mean? They're the ones who started bringing this whole thing as to, you know, bring us as slaves and use our people. In the 1600s, we were used as slaves, right? We were the ones, we were the inhabitants of this place called Hispaniola. We were the original inhabitants, the Puerto Ricans, the people from Mexico, the indigenous people from Mexico, the indigenous people from Central America, the indigenous people from the islands, the Caribbeans, the Canary Islands. We were the original inhabitants, and they used us as slave labor. Before, I'm going to say this, before our Judite brothers came into slavery, we were the first slaves. These Hispanic brothers and sisters that you see, we were the first slaves here. We were the ones who were being used for slave labor. We were being sold. Our children were being sold in Europe as sex slaves, our daughters. Our boys were being sold as slaves to the Spaniards. The problem with us is we could not survive because we were, you know, the original name for La Raza Indígena from Mexico. We were not called what you call Latinos. We were called naturales, naturals. We were known as the naturals. That's the name that was given to us. When you look in the old history books and you start going back to the books of Columbus, the books of Bartolomé de las Casas, the books of Cortez, all these famous conquistador writers, when you begin to look at the writings, they address us as naturals. That's the name that we see there, los naturales. You know, we're not called indios. That name didn't appear. You didn't see the name indios. They weren't calling us Indians. We didn't have that name. That name comes afterwards. That's a name that was given to us. With time, they started to calling us Indians. Oh, they're Indians. A Mexican Indian, Aztec Indian, you know, American Indian. But we weren't called Indians. That name didn't exist for us. The original name given in the Latin language or in the Spanish language or in, you know, in Espanol, right? Espanol is the language that because when we read the books that are translated, it's funny, they're translated from Spanish, right? The Spaniard language, which is known as Castellano. And when you read the Castellano language, and they interpret it to English, for some reason, it went from being naturals, naturales, to Indians, indios. You know, they began to change the names, no longer using the term natural and using the word Indian. And then you start seeing the Spaniards, like what are they called? The friars. They're called friars, Catholic friars and priests. They begin to change the wording also in the 1800s into the word Indian also, indios. But we did not use that word. That word was not our word. We were known as naturales. And the original word for us, Hispanics, Latinos, we used to call each other Nahuales. We're known as Nahuales. Nahuales is the original. Like if I saw a Hispanic brother, I would call him a Nahual. I would be like, oh, you're Nahual, huh? I wouldn't say, oh, you're Indian, or oh, you're a natural, or you're Mexican. I wouldn't use that term. If I wanted to really use a word to describe my people, I would call him a Nahual. I would say, oh, you're Nahual. Why? Because of a language that he's using. And here is how deep it goes. Because if I see a black brother, I'll be like, what's up, Hebrew? Right? Why do I call him Hebrew? Oh, because of the language that he speaks. He uses the language of the Hebrew language. So I understand Hebrew. We call each other Hebrews. What's up, Hebrew? Right? Because why? Because we're using our language as the term to describe who we are. We speak Hebrew, so we call ourselves Hebrew. We spoke Nahual, so we call ourselves Nahuales. They spoke Spanish, so they call themselves, Hispanioles. You know, they call themselves Latinos because they speak Latin. The Latin, the Catholic Church, they speak Latin. So they come over here and they want to tell my brother Gutierrez, oh, you're Latin. But then I tell my brother Gutierrez, hey, Gutierrez, do you speak Latin? And he'll be like, what the fuck is that? My brother Quintin Navarro, I could tell my brother Quintin Navarro, hey, Quintin Navarro, you speak Latin? He'll be like, man, I don't even know what the hell Latin is. We don't understand the Latin. we don't speak Latin. That's not our language. You know what I'm saying? What we did understand the Nawa language, because the Nawa language was our language. So we would speak to each other. Actually, I'll go even deeper, because the Nawa language and the Quiche language and the language that's known as Pipil, which is the Salvador or Central American people, they spoke a language called Pipil or Huipil, and it's almost the same as the Nawa language. So they understood each other in the times of the Aztecs and the Mayans and the ancient ancestors. They understood each other's language. They knew what they were talking about. They traded together. They worked together. They were a nation of people from one end to the other end. Perhaps even the Peruvian Incas spoke a language. I'm not familiar with the Inca language, not yet at least, but I know that they spoke some languages, and I'm pretty sure that their language was also understood by our people. Let me see. Let me go right here with my boy. Let me see. Columbus took his first slaves back to the Queen of Spain, 70-year-old men and women who looked like they were 30. She put up funding to find the fountain of youth. Oh, that's a good point. Now, that's a good point right there. Could be. I'm not familiar with it, but yeah, it sounds like, you know, these devils would do something like that. Manalik Gutierrez says Columbus took his first slaves back to the Queen of Spain, 70-year-old men and women who looked like they were 30. Yeah, you know what? Mexican, Latinas, and our black brothers and sisters, black sisters, they already, I see a lot of them that already aged, but they look beautiful. They you know, older women that looking, you know, still beautiful, you know what I'm saying? And, you know, probably so. They probably aged so bad in Europe that when they saw the older women here in Latin America and how beautiful they were at an older age, they were like, man, there must be something that they must be eating or drinking or something that keeps them looking, you know, live like that, you know, beautiful like that. Could be. I'm not going to take that as a not so real answer. Let's go back to the language. So now we're seeing that that, you know, we all spoke a similar language. We all spoke a similar language. Now I'm going to tell you something. I think that the Mayans established themselves, right, along with the what is that? The Olmecs. The Olmecs, Khan, sis, Rana, to keep them looking youthful. You know what I'm saying? Absolutely. That's a good life. That's why. You know, the Olmec people, some of the first established civilizations in Mexico, along with the Mayans, another of the oldest civilizations in Mexico, and the Incas, you know, Machu Picchu, places like that. The Mayans, I'll go straight to the Mayans, because we still have Mayan artifacts, Mayan writings, and the language, the Quiche language, which still exists in our nations. The language Chuj. There's thousands of languages in Latin America and Central America that, let me tell you something, the Central American and the Mexican people are fond about keeping their ancient language and traditions alive, you know, and it's good because it helps us to understand. So are the Olmecs Israel? Khan, the Olmecs are Israel. How else did they get here? How else did they manage to come to this place? The Olmecs have very little archaeological evidence, except for the big heads, some evidence that they found. But the Olmecs, of course, the Israel. Of course, I would say the Olmecs are definitely Israel. You know what I'm saying? Remember, a lot of these nations kept traditions similar to Israel. That's how you know they had to be Israel. Their festive days, the foods they ate, unleavened bread, the constant bathing, you know what I'm saying? Wedding, how they used to wed each other, different things that if you really go into the culture, you begin to see the similarities between Israel and the naturales, or I'm going to say it, the Nahuatl people, because they're all Nahuatls, right? The Nahuatl people of this continent. So the similarities are real tight. When you begin to see the similarity between the Mayans and the Israelites, the Aztecs and the Israelites, the Toltecs and the Israelites, Chichimecas and other tribes, even up here, when you look at the tribes here in North America, you see a lot of similarities of a lot of the holidays and traditions and culture that they have, so similar to Israel. So, you know, are we Latin or Hispanic, or are we Israel? That's the question, because, you know, nowadays we want to be Chicanos. Nowadays we want to be, you know, Mexicanos. Nowadays we want to be all these things, but we don't want to know where we come from. We don't want to know how far back our history really goes. I'm going to show that one more time. Now that you got a little bit more understanding on the different cultures, you know, I'm gonna bring back that picture one more time, and for you can understand how our language makes who we are. Once again, I see brothers in the ISUPK and we're like, what's good, Hebrew? You know what I'm saying? Hey, shalom, Hebrew. When we see the people of Mexico, right, us Mexicans, we don't call ourselves Latinos or Hispanos. If we were to choose a word, we would call ourselves Nahuales. You know what I mean? We would be like, we're Nahual, because that's our original language. The Nahual language went throughout all of Latin America and South America. We were known as Nahuales. You know what I'm saying? So with that being said, you understand that's how deep it goes into who we are. You know what I mean? So now that we know this, let's show that picture one more time so you can begin to have some understanding of what it is that we're looking at when we say that we are. Let me told in our history, in our ancient history, as the origin of where we came from. But it's not the origin where we came from. Let's get that right. It's not the origin of where we came from. It's the origin of where we separated from. Because if you go into the Mayan history, it tells you that we came from the east. That means, according to the book of Esdras, right, we came across the sea. The 10 tribes came from across the sea, and they came and they stopped somewhere. right? They established a place somewhere. From that place, they dispersed in time and went and established their cities. You know what I mean? Now, why is it 7 caves? I heard that the 7 caves are the 7 major tribes that came here. So the Mayans were a major tribe. The Toltecs were a major tribe. The Olmecs were a major tribe. You see what I'm saying? The Incas were a major tribe. Perhaps in the northern in Northern America, they were major tribes that came out of that location. But it doesn't mean there was only 7 tribes. It just means that were the major ones. There was leaders, as always, one who leads them, right? That's why they use the word, and I use it all the time. They use the word Platoni, which means one who speaks. And the reason that they called these people Platonis is because they were the ones who spoke for everybody. They were the ones who made decisions. They had the council. They had someone to lead them. One of those leaders, one of those Platonis, just so happens to be this man known as Quetzalcoatl. Now, the story of Quetzalcoatl, now we hear it, and we hear that it's some magical serpent with wings that breathes fire out of his mouth. And it's just like they worship him as a serpent. But the original story was not that. That's the story of a man that ended up turning into, as always, a mythical story of some magical being. But this man was not no magical being. He was not no mythical story. He was a leader known as Quetzalcoatl, and he led his people out, and he established rules, and he established cities, and he established a law system, a system of law. And this man became to everybody like what Moses was to Israel, someone that they could look up to, someone that had authority. And of course, he had a council. He wasn't by himself. He had a council of other leaders who would meet, and they would make decisions and lead. This man was not only the leader of the Aztecs. In the Mayan language, he was known as Kukulkan. Kukulkan means feathered serpent in the Quiche language. So this man not only led the Aztecs, but he also led the Mayans. He had authority with them too, in establishing cities and establishing laws and establishing other rules that they had to abide from. So you got this man who has authority, right? This man Quetzalcoatl was known to be the man who established different cities. Not only did he establish Tenochtitlan, not only did he establish Tolan, with the city of the Toltecs, he also established a city named Cuscatlan. Cuscatlan is the city of Central America, of El Salvador. If you go to El Salvador today, there is a city called Cuscatlan today. It's a major city. That city was established by this man, I don't know, 500 years ago, more, 600, 700 years ago, Cuscatlan. He was a man who led them. Now, how do I know that he had a council? How do I know that he had leaders? Because the story of this man is that he was doing well, leading, establishing his city, setting up laws. One thing about of Quetzalcoatl, because we hear that the Aztecs sacrificed children and men to Quetzalcoatl. Let me tell you something. The man Quetzalcoatl was a man who refused human sacrifices. In the history that you read of this man, he was not about human sacrifices. On the contrary, he set laws against some of the major laws that we see in the Bible. The 10 Commandments were established also in his time. He also established those kind of laws. Second to him was another man, Nezacoyote, another great leader in Latin America, in Mexico, in our ancestors' lineage. He also established great cities and also refused any kind of human sacrifice, also establishing laws and great cities just like Quetzalcoatl did. Why am I saying this? Because our history is important, Mexicanos, raza, Salvadoreños, Guatemaltecos. And I want to find the right word to use because I don't want to use the word Latinos. or Hispanos, or Chicanos, or, you know, I could use the word raza, which is probably the closest that I got. Raza, which is for everybody. Puerto Ricans, I don't know, Hispanic, Salvadoreños, Guatemaltecos, Hondureños, you know, mi raza, Venezolanos, Haitianos, Dominicanos, mi raza, mi gente, right? Mi gente, mi raza. So this man established all these laws for our raza, for our gente, so that we can live a righteous life. Unfortunately, here comes the story of what happened to this man, Quetzalcoatl, that within his own council, there was wicked men who rose up against him and his council, and they turned against him. And when they turned against him, there was a war, and this war caused Quetzalcoatl to leave. And this is how the city of Cuscatlan in El Salvador was established, because this man left and he took his people with him, those followers of Quetzalcoatl, and they fled and they established the city of Cuscatlan. Now I hear this story, this myth that says, well, Quetzalcoatl got on a boat and he sailed off, saying that one day he would return and he would come back and he would, you know, reign again. Well, that's a story that is a myth, because it's something that is said that is mythical. But if you go into the story of El Salvador, people from El Salvador understand who established their city, Cuscatlan, which means the jeweled city, the city of jewels. And this man established that city and he reigned there in that city. So this is the story of where we come from. You know what I'm saying? And how we establish these cities. There's also the story of how we became, you know, and settled here. And that comes from the story of the Mayans. And that story, like I had said before, is of a man who bring us from Quintin Navarro, El Salvador. Yeah, that's why when I said the word Cuscatlan, that's the original name before the Spaniards settled and changed its name to El Salvador, which is the Savior, right? Who is that? That white Christ is the name that they gave it, because, you know, the Spaniards were hung up on that white Christ, you know what I mean? So yeah, El Salvador is the name of the Savior, but that's a Spaniard name. The original name that was given to that land is Cuscatlan, which means in Nahuatl, it means the city of jewels, or jeweled city, somewhere there. You know, that's what that means. And so he established this city and he became ruler in this city. And that's the way that city got its name. So the name, so you're wondering, well, what is the name of this place? You know, what was Azareth before? Or it was Azareth, but what was it changed to? What was Azareth changed to, right? So the name of Azareth in the Nahuatl language is Anahuac, which means land by the sea. I believe that's what the word Anahuac means. It means land by the sea, or land by the sea, right? Let me Nahuac. Let me get it correctly so that we can get it right. So the name Anahuac, which is the name of the landmass that our ancestors gave America. Before it was called America, it was called Anahuac, right? And another thing that you might closely hear and understand, the names I'm using, Anahuac, is Hebrew. We're using vocabulary that's Hebrew, Anahuac. You know, we're using right? Wa, an, right? These are the Hebrew words. You know, when you hear the Hebrew words, ba, ga, da, right? Let me see. So let me go into this. Okay, so what is the Anahuac? What does that mean? The Anahuac is a Nahuatl name, which means close to water. That's what it means. So it means close to water. It's Anahuac. And that's the language we use. And you can understand how, you know, the Anahuac, our Nahuatl language is close to, you know, the Hebrew language. The Mayan language, the Quiche and the Chuk is close to the Hebrew language. You know what I'm saying? Let me tell you something. If you were to tell me, stop, I would say, stop calling me Spanish, because that's the name of of the guy who conquered me. I would say, stop calling me Hispanic, because that's the name of the guy who conquered me. How are you going to call me Mexican, or how are you going to call me Latino or Hispanic, and then not let me use my language, Nahuatl, or say that language is not your language, or that's some shady language, or that's not your language? That's what people would tell you. Nahuatl, that's, you know, what the hell is that? Well, it's better than using Latino. It's better than using goddamn Hispanic. Those are my languages. If you call me Latino, it's because you're calling me the name of a language known as Latin. If you call me Hispanic, you're calling me the name of a language known as Hispaniola, the Hispanic. So I'm neither one. I'm not Spanish, because that's the Spaniard language. So why do you want to call me Hispanic, Latin, or Spanish? If you're going to call me something, call me Nahuatl, because that's also the language that is mine. That's my original language. And I can go further. You can call me Hebrew, because that is true. I am a Hebrew. So you can call me Hebrew, or you can call me Nahuatl, because those are both my original heritage, my original language. That's where I come from, right? And Nahuatl is pronounced just like that. N-A-W-A-T, Nahuatl. You know what I mean? It's Aztec or Mexican. That's what it is. That's the definition of it. Today they want to call it Uto-Aztecan. That you go into what Uto-Aztecan is, and you go into the universities, and they'll say, oh, well, you mean the Nahuatl language, or you mean Uto-Aztecan? No, man, you're calling it Uto-Aztecan. The original language is Nahuatl. It comes back to the times of my people, right? Let me tell you, the Numic, the Comanche, the Kawili, right? The Hopi, they all spoke a language similar to Nahuatl. The Shoshain, right? All of them spoke a language that they call today Uto-Aztecan or Uto-Nahuatl, which is the same ones that we all use. The Pipi language in El Salvador, right? The Salmon, the Shoshain, in Idaho, they all spoke this thing called Uto-Aztecan, which is Nahuatl language. Same goddamn language. So if you go into the language of us, this is the language that we spoke. This is the many languages that the indigenous people, right, in the linguistic categories, they spoke this language, and it is almost like a Hebrew language, because a lot of the words are using what are they called, man? Syllables that they used back then. So once again, I got people who tell me, well, you shouldn't be speaking Nahuatl. That's not your language. You shouldn't be speaking, Pipi Nahuatl, because you don't. That wasn't your language. That wasn't your language. Well, Latin wasn't my language. Spanish wasn't my language, right? Those are my languages. Hispanic is not my language. But people want to call me Latino, Hispano. They want to call you Spanish. Oh, you're Spanish. No, I'm not Spanish. I'm not Latin. I'm not Hispanic, because those are languages. You want to call me by a language, call me Nahuatl. Call me the Nahuatl language. Or go further, call me that I'm from a Nahuatl. Those are my languages. And I'll go even further, like we began to speak. You can go ahead and call me Hebrew, because those languages are similar. Let me tell you, the Anahuac language, Nahuatl, the Quiche, the Chuk, and the goddamn Pipil are closer to Hebrew than Spanish, Latin, or Hispanic are. Those languages are not my language, and they don't even come close to being close to my language. My language, at least, the Nahuatl and the Chuk and the Pipil, at least they got words that are Hebrew words. You know what I'm saying? Or at least get closer than these do. You know what I'm saying? So the Nahuas, right? we come from a long way. You know what I mean? We come from a place, Anahuac, which I think I'm gonna say the word Anahuac. I want to give you a definition from it, but it's it's not really like know what it means. It does mean by the sea, but since it's a Nahual, it's a language. It has different. One word has different meanings. It also means like they came this far. That's what or the Nahuas come this far. It means coming this from a distance. That's what it means. It means coming from a distance close to the sea. So that's what it means. It kind of relates to somewhere around there, coming from a distance close to the sea. So that's what that word means. So understanding that, this is how far our people go. Our people go as far back as knowing that we didn't only come to this continent and dispersed from one certain place, but we also came from a place further than that. You know, the word means here by the water, surrounded by sea, or from a far place, or close to the sea. This is what the Nahuas, the Nahuales, when they say a Nahuac, this is what they mean. In other words, they were trying to say, imagine this. Back then, let's say we were 700 years back, and you ran into a Nahual, right? Somebody from a Nahuac, from our ancient land. And you were to tell him, what is this place called? He would be trying to tell you, well, it means this. And he would tell you it means that that we came from far. It means that we came from far, close to the sea. It means that we're surrounded by water. So they're trying to explain to you where they're coming from, but it's hard for them to translate it into Spanish or into Hispanic or into Latin. You know what I mean? They can't explain it in their words, because that word is so deep on Nahuatl, so deep Nahuatl, that it's hard to explain what it means, because the words like for instance, I'll give you a good example, something that I've posted before. You might have seen it. Like if you want to tell your girl, right? If brothers, you want to tell your girl, hey, you know what? I love you, right? In a Nahuatl or in Nahual, you want to tell them I love you. There is no word that means I love you. It doesn't exist in Nahual. There is no way to say that word. That you can't say that word. There's no reference to it. I can't say I love you to my girl in Nahuatl because it doesn't exist. I would have to say Mitzi moa no yolo, which means my heart, mi corazón te extraña, my heart misses you. You see, I can't say that word the way it's being said in Spanish or Latin. It doesn't exist. The only way I could possibly say it is my heart misses you, is the only way that it can be said, because it doesn't exist. That word doesn't exist in our language. That phrase doesn't exist. Same way when they try to explain to you what a Nahuatl means, well, it's hard to explain, because the way they see it is more, you know, it's a little deeper than that. You know what I'm saying? And I believe that when you look at the Hebrew language is the same. The Hebrew language is so deep, and it's such a beautiful language, right? That when you try to say things, you know, it's like you don't really, it can't be translated. You could say it's kind of like it means this, but if you were to translate it, it doesn't sound like that. You know what I mean? Because it just doesn't fit. It's deeper. Our language, the Hebrew language, the Nahuatl language is deeper. The Mayan language is deeper. We have a certain something that takes it further down than what you're used to. Like the English language is broken. What is that? Broken. What is that? What do they call that? Anglo-Saxon, right? It's a broken Anglo-Saxon. Anglo-Saxons say things, but when an American says it, they're like, that you're speaking American. That's not English. The English is a different word. Same with the Spaniard. When Mexicans speak and a Spaniard hears you, they know you're Mexican. They know you're not from Spain because of the way you're speaking your Spanish. They're like, that's ghetto Spain, you know, that kind of like that. You're like, you're not speaking the right Spanish or Castellano. You're speaking some broken Spanish, and they see it as garbage. They see our language as garbage. Just the same way the English who speak the real Anglo-Saxon see American people as they speak garbage, right? They say vosotros, vosotros, which means us. We say nosotros, they say vosotros. You know, they have a different way of speaking. The language is different, but their language doesn't compare to our language, our original language, the Hebrew, the Nahuatl, the Pipi, the Chuk, these languages. These languages go even deeper. When you really begin to understand and research your language and begin to understand your language, you begin to realize what a beautiful language we have. And then when you start to see the origin of our language, like I begin to see the origin of our language and I see, oh man, that's like in the Hebrew, right? I see the Hebrew language in the Mayan language when they speak certain words, you know, they have different, they have a different sound, a different meaning. You know what I mean? Our history comes from a long way. Our people come from our language. Our language says it all. Our history says it all. The conquistadores knew who we were. They knew that we weren't just anybody. When the conquistadores came, Darnell, let me see, I was friends with a Mexican in school and he failed Spanish class. He would clown on in, but he said it was a different dialect. Yeah, you know, you're right, Darnell, the water for joining in. You know, you're right. The Spanish they teach you in school is not the Spanish we learn on the street. Like the Spanish they teach in high school is not the Spanish you're going to use on the street. Let me tell you, when you go up to a Mexican and you speak that Spanish they teach you in school, a real Mexican's going to look at you and he's going to be like, okay, this guy learned Spanish in some goddamn school. You ain't speaking no street, you know street Spanish, because our street Spanish is different. We speak it a lot different. The words we use are completely different than the words they teach you in school. You know what I mean? Those are like those programs that you get online to teach you how to speak Spanish, and they're teaching you some kind of perfect Spanish, but that's not the Spanish we speak. Like we don't use that Spanish. It's kind of like you know, like brothers, when you go get a job and you gotta speak that other English. You know what I'm talking about. You can't speak your English, you gotta speak that right English. You know, you can't say, hey, how you doing? What's up? You know, you gotta be like, oh, good morning, sir. How you doing today? You know what I'm saying? Like that kind of, you know, but when you're at your job long enough, you know, you can be like, oh, what's good? You know, that kind of English, you know what I mean? That's the kind of English I speak no matter where I'm at. Oh, what's good, brother? You know, that's the kind of that's the kind of English I speak. And let me tell you something, in my job, when Hispanic people come in, they know I'm Mexican because of the way I speak to them. And some of my white coworkers, they ask me, hey, is that the way you say that? Because I don't use the traditional Spanish that they're using to greet people. I use the word jefe. Jefe means boss. I said this to a friend of mine. I said this once before. I said, Black people and Hispanic people, we unconsciously use the same words and we don't even know it. Like we call our girls chaparrita. That's a term of endearment, chaparrita, which means shorty, right? We use the word jefe, which means boss. You know what I'm saying? We use that. What's good, boss? You know, and we use that word too. We use the word jefe. ¿Qué onda, jefe? You know. We use the word primo. What's up, cousin? We use the word pariente. What's up, family? Pariente means family. What's up, family? What's up, pariente? You know, these are the kind of words that we use, and there's plenty of them that we use that are similar, that we use unconsciously as our, you know, as daily, but we don't even know that we're using the same words. You know what I mean? Like in English and in Spanish, it's our what is that? Our ghetto language. that we do. You know, we in the ISBK, we say it all the time. We got so much in common, right? So many things that we do similar, that we're alike, and even the language that we use. And I know some of the brothers that are the Hispanic brothers, you know, if you hadn't heard this before, you understand that I'm telling the truth. You know what I mean? You know, we're using the same language and we don't even know it. You know what I mean? So with that, you got to understand that, you know, our culture is very similar because we all come from the same place. And our history is similar because we also share that same history. Does the mean way mean, you know, that word that you're using, Quintil, the way you're spelling it, way, that's a word in the Nahuatl, right? That word way is watch, let me I'm gonna tell you what that means. The word way, because I know you're trying to give it to me as like donkey, but it doesn't. It means great. It means tall. It means, remember, like I said again, the word way in Nahuatl, that's a Nahuatl word, way, but it means different meanings. But it goes to the same thing. It means great preacher, great governor, tall. It means like the word way means great. Like I weigh, oh, you're great. We use the word is way Latoni, which means great speaker. Way Latoni means great speaker. So when a king was when they issued a king, when somebody went into king, he was called a way Latoni. That's what that means. So when you say that word way, it really means great. It really means the great preacher, great governor, like commanding General Yohana would be the way Latoni, the great speaker. That's what in our language, that's what we would call commanding General Yohana, way Latoni, the great speaker, and that's what that means. It means great. You know what I mean? But of course, today we hear the word way, but B-U-Y-E would be way, right? But in the Nahuatl, it means great. That's what that word means. That's a translation to way in the Nahuatl. Grande, that means grande or gran. You know what I mean? So once again, back to the point. No, that's the different way. That's what we call people. No mames way, right? That's a different way. But when you speak about, you know, where we come from, how far we coming back, where our people came from, well, our history in Mexico is important. It's important to see it because, you know, we're overlooking one of the greatest histories, or one of the greatest, how could I say, accumulation of history for one single people, and that's the Nahuatl people. And I'm not going to call them Mayans or Salvadoranians or Mexicans or Latinos, but the Nahuatl people, because they've been able to save their history for so long, and today even more, because today with the excavations going on in Latin America, they've been able to find even more archaeological evidence of who we are. And with that history, we're proving even more and more and more that we are a special people that come from somewhere else where we were great, and we bring all that greatness with us. You know what I'm saying? Like, we bring all that greatness with us. The ideas of making pyramids, the bathhouses, the marketplaces, the aqueduct system, agriculture, cultivation, you know what I mean? Laws, statutes, and commandments, right? Keeping high holy days, all this we bring with us. At some point, we kept everything the same. And then came the falling away. Then came where we fell away from all that was good, and once again went back to our wicked self. And once you know it, there came a tribe, the last tribe, the Mexica tribe. the tribe of the Mexicas, the last ones that came out of that cave to ruin everything. They came out and they were a warring tribal people, and they came back with their worshiping of the sun, their worshiping of the gods, their worshiping of the thunder, the air, you know, the god of corn, and they came back to these things. They came back so heavy that when it didn't rain, they thought that their god stopped raining for them, and they started doing human sacrifices so that their god could bring back rain. Once again, you had a group of people that once again were back to their origins of superstitions that they brought with them from Assyria, from Egypt, from Babylon, from the kingdoms where they were held captive. They went back to those gods. And at one time, we weren't there. At one time, we were worshiping a single God, the God that made everything. Or even the Ayar brothers who were in Peru, right? The Incas. Well, they even knew there was one God. They knew the God that flooded the earth. They knew that they need to establish their kingdom and start all over again, just as our people did over here. You know what I'm saying? These stories, superstitions, whatever you want to call them, all are biblical stories that come from the time of our God, and that come from the time that we established our covenant with the Most High. And we came back and we tried to keep it. But at some point, as always, you know, this didn't only happen in Mexico. This didn't only happen to the Anahuac people or to the people of this land of Anahuac or the Nahuatl people. It's also happened to Moses. When Moses came back down from the mountain, right, from getting the commandments, he came back to what? He came back to find the people worshiping a cow again. He came back to finding the Hebrew Israelites going back to the gods of their oppressors, the God of their wicked nations. They came back and saw that. He came back to see that. And just like that, there was also the division. There was also Hebrew Israelites that were opposed to that. They were like, man, we ain't going to do that. We followed Moses all the way over here to what? To go back to that? No, we're not with that. So there was a separation. What is that? That the Bible says a nation divided cannot stand. You know, and the Israelites, man, we were being divided, and we were finding it hard. And we were finding it really difficult to be able, because some of them were thinking one way, other of us were thinking of one way. These wicked people, what did the Most High did? He opened the earth and swallowed them, right? That's what he did to them. And there was my people, the Ishakarites, there was Judites, there was a lot of them that were doing that. And so that's why when I see the story of the Aztecs and the Mayans and some of these cultures that are worshiping, like I see the sun god and this, and the worshiping of this, and I see these, I go to these Aztec festivals where they're doing this dance for this and dance, and I realize these are my people. They have to be, because we're so wicked. We're so easily taken away from our God to worship these other gods of our oppressor. And that's how you know that, man, this is, if the Most High would have gave the commandments to the Chinese, they would have followed them to the T. If the Most High would have gave the commandments to the Caucasians, they would have kept every single commandment there was. Or to the Africans, they would have kept every single commandment. But since he gave it to us, Black, Hispanics, and Native American Indians, man, we are so hard-headed. We are so taken by everything else that we're the ones who would never do that. But we want to do what they do. We want to worship the 4th of July. We want to worship the Memorial Days. We want to worship their Christmas. We want to worship their New Year. We want to do all the things that they do. We want to do it all out blatantly and all the time. We want to always participate in these things. Why? Because we're a stiff-necked people. We never, ever do the things we're supposed to, but we'll do the things that we're not supposed to. If God would have picked another nation, we'd be, man, we're going to do what they do. You know what I'm saying? We want to be just like them. But instead, we're out here doing the will of a nation that hates us, that destroys us, that oppresses us, that keeps us under all the time. We're second-class citizens in the land of America, where it's supposed to be free, where your ancestors your grandfather, your great-grandfather died in the wars, went and fought and killed and murdered men, women, and children for the freedom of America. And yet every single time that they came back from war, they came back to be oppressed, to live in the ghettos, to live in the housing projects, to live in the barrios, right? To have second-class jobs, to be on welfare, to be on drugs, to be arrested. The unproportionate amount of us in the prison system, right? Being beaten on the streets by police. This is our daily. This is the history of Black, Hispanics, and Native American Indians. We want to love a country that historically has been a monster to us, that has never done anything for us and said, hey, you know, this is because of what we did to you. If anybody should get reparations, well, shouldn't the Mexicans get that, reparations? Shouldn't the Native American Indians get reparations? Well, how about our Black brothers and sisters? Shouldn't they get reparations? But instead, the Asians got reparations. The Armenians get reparations. The Armenians and the Ukrainians are getting all the help they can get, coming to America to be safe, because they're important people, because they're human, and human rights are important, and they need to look after them. But what about our rights? What about our humanity? What about our, you know, being human? What about the human rights for us? Why do my people have to die in 200 degrees heat in the back of a truck? Men, women, and children. How many? 58 of them in the back of a semi-truck in Texas. Why do they have to die like that? Why did they have to die behind there? Why couldn't they be at the border like the Ukrainians are and got visas to come over? They're coming to work. I guarantee you that all those Mexican families are either going to be selling at the swap meet, selling at a corner fruit, or they're going to be working in the hotels or out in the fields. They're going to be working. They're going to be working. That's for sure. They're going to be paying taxes. They're going to be renting homes somewhere. They're not going to come here to rob, steal, and murder. On the contrary, that's what these people are doing. These people are coming and doing these wicked things. They're going to establish more of the dispensaries. Armenians, that's what they're doing. Armenians coming over, opening up dispensaries, driving around in the Mercedes-Benz, BMWs, buying up all the houses, buying up all the land. And us, we're becoming second-class citizens again, being discriminated on. Our areas being gentrified. We're being destroyed. You know what I'm saying? And it's been 600 years of this for us Hispanics and Native Indians, and 500 years for my Black brothers and sisters. And what happens to us? When do we wake up and decide, okay, let's stop this? Well, we can't, because we're still trapped in the mentality and the miseducation and the lies of an American dream. We're still here thinking you're American, still calling yourself Black American, still using the term Mexican American, still writing on your thing a Native American Indian. We still want to embrace an American culture that has nothing to do with us but death and destruction. We still want to be part of a nation that has never loved us, never will love us, and only seeks to make us miserable, discriminating on us, calling us names, you know, making our kids, you know, a life miserable. You know what I'm saying? They don't care about us. And you know what? We don't care about ourselves. Because if we cared about ourselves, more of us would be doing this. If we cared about ourselves, more of us would be speaking on the issues that really matter. More of us would be waking our people up to the reality of, man, this is not our rest. So says the Bible. This is not our place. This is not for us. When will we wake up and move forward? For my Nahuatl people, my raza, it's time that we wake up. It's time that we do this work. It's time that we initiate a step that helps us move forward inside of ourselves, in our spirit, to speak up for those who have no voice and continually die in America. You know what I'm saying? This is what we need to do. This is what we need to do. This is what we need to be, in a state of mind that is no longer what we've been taught in our education system and in our schools. You know what I'm saying? Darnell, you absolutely right. The African American, Mexican American, Native American Indian is an oxymoron, because that is something that we should never be using in our vocabulary to identify ourselves. Once again, on me, I'm a Hebrew. Second, I'm a Nawak. I'm Nawak. That's what I am. That's my original language. I'm not Latin. I'm not Hispanic. I'm not Spanish. That's not me. You want to call me anything? You can call me Nawak. You can call me a Nawak or Nawal. That's what you can call me. I appreciate better. You can call me Hebrew. You know what I'm saying? But other than that, I cannot use the term Latino or Hispanic, because those are not mine, or Spanish. You know what I mean? Because those are not terms that fit me. And I'm definitely not Mexican American, right? Ain't that a truth? We ain't Latino, we're not Hispanic, we're not Spanish, and we're definitely not Mexican American. You know what I mean? With that, man, I want to thank everybody for joining me. This is the ISUPK coming out of 125th Street, Harlem, New York City. The Inconvenient Truth, as always, man, straight out of California. You know what I'm saying? This Officer Kasakiat 5000, Most High in Christ for Commanding General Johanna, and all the brothers and sisters in the ISUPK who hold up this truth and stick with it and help raise up more and more of Israel so that they can come closer and closer. When we remember who our Lord is and call him by his name, you know what I'm saying? That's who we are, and that's who we gotta uplift. Don't forget, tomorrow we got the ISUPK with Captain Gadahar. You know what I'm saying? You can tune in to tomorrow's show right here in ISUPK, Hebrew Israelites, Hollywood Israelites, Salakia, Hollywood Israelites, One West Radio. Right after that, tune in with Captain Gadahar. You know what I'm saying? As always, I want to thank everybody for joining the show. Share it, like it, comment, pass it on, man. And don't forget, man, we are the ISUPK coming out of 125th Street, Harlem, New York City. And with that, shalom, Israel.